Hi everybody, thank you for joining us today for our webinar, OBC and SBC, ISCO and Bioremediation in One Product. We have Mr. Lorenzo Cicchetti as our speaker today, and we're just going to go through a few items before we get started with his presentation. So a few housekeeping items. We have attendees in listen-only mode. This is going to help cut down on the background noise. There is a question section within GoToWebinar, so please go ahead and input any questions that you think of throughout the webinar, or as we near the end. We should have time at the end to get to the questions and answers. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we are able to see the email address associated with the question asked, so we will directly follow up with you. We will be using the polls feature today, so we'll just ask 2 general polls throughout the presentation. If you would like a PDF of today's presentation, please get in contact with me and I will be sure to forward that on to you. And also today's webinar is being recorded, so we typically will post that within about 48 hours on our website, which is linked to our YouTube page, and then we will email all of the attendees as well. Here is where you can access off of our website. So any upcoming webinars, you can register from this location, and then you can also get to any of our previously recorded webinars. They're all on the right-hand side of this page off of our website. How to find us. Here's a couple different ways to find us. We have our website listed. We have our general email, sales and marketing, and then we also have my email address here listed. We're also active on a few social media platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So go ahead and follow us on those. We typically will post about product offerings, employee updates, any sort of upcoming conferences, trade shows, seminars, or presentations that we're doing. Also, we'll have some articles that we post on there, whether they be Carus written or any sort of news in the industry. And so here we're going to just quickly launch our first poll so everybody can get familiar with this system, and we're going to ask you where you located or based. So that should be launching right now. If you want to go ahead and input your answers. Great. So it looks like a majority is from North America, and we also have some from Europe and other locations. Great. We welcome everybody to the webinar. At this time, I would like to go ahead and introduce our presenter, which is Mr. Lorenzo Cicchetti. Lorenzo is the Director of Remediation for Europe, Middle East, Asia, Australia, and Africa. He joined Carus Corporation in 2008. He was born and raised in Italy, and he currently resides in Milan. Lorenzo first began working in remediation for a major Italian oil refinery in 1993. During this time, he also taught high school financial mathematics. Lorenzo went on to work for various remediation companies, holding positions such as field engineer, project manager, technical lead, and principal consultant before joining Carus in 2008. Take it away, Lorenzo.
Okay, so good evening, good morning, everybody. Today we will talk about our SBC and OBC products, which are mainly products dedicated to the treatment of hydrocarbons. So we'll start with a short overview about Carus, and we will talk about aerobic bioremediation fundamentals, and we will talk about SBC, which is the Sulfate BioChem bioremediation product, and then we talk about chemical oxidation with persulfate, and OBC, which is our activated persulfate product. So, a few words about Carus. Carus is over 100 years old, headquartered in Peru, Illinois, with manufacturing in the US, and some products are manufactured and blended in Europe. Major focus of the company are drinking water, wastewater, air purification, and then soil and groundwater remediation, which I'm responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So, Carus is located, as I said before, with headquarters in the US, close to Chicago. Then we have European offices in Spain, close to Oviedo. Then we have direct sales or sales through agents on a global scale. So we have representative or distributors. We have just concluded a distribution agreement with South Africa, and we have many of these agreements through Europe and all the globe. Simplified science, this is our claim. So everybody knows remediation is complex. It's not exactly an easy stuff. In situ remediation even more. So the idea of our technologies is to propose technology which makes things simply. Simply doesn't mean inaccurate, but means that we try to provide chemicals that can be used in an easy way, because we know that when you are in the field, you cannot have too many things to do. So you have to be focused on in field activities, you have to be focused on safety. This is our portfolio of products. Chemical oxidation, we have permanganate-based product Remox S and Remox L. We have sustained release reagents based on permanganate, which is Remox SR, and persulfate XR based on persulfate. Biological technologies, we have aerobic, X-Fer and Oxygel, anaerobic, Cap18 family of products, including Cap18Me and ABC-Ole. And then we have OBC, which is the chemical oxidation aerobic bio based on activated persulfate, and SBC, which is a bioremediation product to stimulate sulfate reducing bacteria. Then the last product that we have is ABC Plus, which is anaerobic biochem. It's a carbon substrate additivated with zero valent iron for reductive dechlorination, mainly for chlorinated solvents. Here is a selection chart that you can use for a preliminary screening of our technologies and of the contaminant of concerns, of the issues that you can find. So for instance, if you follow the OBC line, you can see that OBC can be used with the chlorinated and ethenes, other chlorinated you can use with the TPHs. And the same with SBC, you can see why it is suggested and why it is not suggested. Chemistry and biology. So today we will talk about a product which is OBC, which combine chemical and biology action, and we will talk about SBC, which is mainly a biological treatment. We know that the general perception of in situ treatment is that biology is much more friendly than chemistry. From the other side, biology can be much slower. Coupling the two technology allows to get the best of each one, so we can work on the fast characteristic of the chemistry, coupled to the fact that the biological treatment is generally considered a mild treatment and can reach down very low target levels. The technology selection criteria mainly are based on concentration and area. We can consider source area where most of the contaminant mass is located, but with a very small plume size, and then outer areas that we can call plume areas, where mainly the concentration is dissolved, the contamination is dissolved in contamination, where we have a very big plume size, 75–20% of plume size, but the mass in the dissolved phase is much lower with respect of the source area. This reflects on the kind of technology that you can apply. Of course, in the source area, which is small, you can use a technology that allows you to put a lot of effort, to put a lot of money, to put a lot of energy per cubic meter of soil, while in the other areas, different technologies which requires a less intrusive, less invasive approach can be used. So in the source area, you can use chemical oxidation. You can apply OBC, which is a product which has been designed for source area treatment, for dispersion on bottom of excavation, for injection by direct push. And in the outer area, you can consider use of SBC to stimulate sulfur reducing bacteria, or in sometimes you can use also OBC just to speed up the reactions. I would like just to to spend a few words talking about the mechanism of SBC, which is the sulfate BioChem. Just reminding that it's a bioremediation product. Mainly, it's a biostimulation product. So we provide something to the environment to increase the natural occurring degradation rate. So mainly, we provide the optimal environment to bacteria to do their work and to destroy the contaminants. This is not a bioaugmentation treatment. Of course, you can bioaugment SBC, but this is not our business. So, central dogma of bioremediation. We are on the first line. We are on the aerobic pathway, and on the left side, you see what happens for human beings. So, as we eat food, as we eat carbohydrates, and we breathe oxygen to get energy, and we produce wastes, and we get the energy for our life. Bacteria mainly does the same. So they heat the contaminant, in this case, or let's say hydrocarbons. They breathe oxygen, and with this reaction, which is a oxidation reduction reaction, they get energy for their life. Typically, we provide oxygen. So the traditional approach of this technology is to provide oxygen. And in the beginning of remediation history, air sparging or biosparging was the first technology applied. So injecting air and into the aquifer, so that in the bubbling you can have a mass transfer of oxygen from the air to the water. This was not really efficient. After that, the second step was the presence of powders releasing oxygen, which mainly are carbon peroxide, like the XPER, which is provided by Carus, or use of nanogel releasing oxygen, which is Oxygel, which is another product that we can provide. The next step, the more promising one, is the biostimulation of sulfate-reducing bacteria. So this is a schematic of electron acceptors distribution in the environment. So we see that far from the source of organic contaminants, we have clean groundwater where we're supposed to have oxic conditions. So we have dissolved oxygen. We don't have contaminants, and bacteria. When bacteria starts to get the contaminants migrating from the source, they start to consume the oxygen, and this is something that human being cannot do. When oxygen is finished, human being die, but bacteria can take the oxygen, or better, can exchange electrons with other electron acceptors, so they can start to take oxygen from nitrate. They can reduce iron, and then they can go in sulfate reducing conditions. So bacteria, in this case, some specific strains of bacteria, in particular sulfate reducing bacteria strains, can take the oxygen from the SO4 of the sulfates. We always wonder whether these bacteria are and whether they can work, and this is an example of a study of 74 sites impacted by gasoline before any remediation activity. It is 950 samples, and this study is focused on detecting which is the current electron acceptor situation on site. And this clearly shows that most of sites are in sulfur reducing condition. Some of them are in nitrate reduction, or few of them in aerobic, some also in methanogenesis condition, but most of sites are in this situation. So sulfate reducing condition are a natural condition, and are very common in the environment. These are other two graphs that shows in which way the presence of sulfate can be correlated to the presence of contamination. In the top one, you see that concentration of benzene in well has an inverse correlation with sulfate presence in well. So when sulfate are not limiting, when you have a lot of sulfate, you usually do not see benzene, while when sulfate levels are very low, you can see presence of benzene. This shows that sulfate reducing condition can work. In the other one, in the bottom, you see the difference in terms of number of sites with high level of sulfate and low level of sulfate in plume. You see that there is a wide difference between the plume and the background, showing that there is presence of sulfate-reducing bacterial activity. So what is SBC? SBC stands for Sulfate BioChem. Previously it was known as OBC, so Oxygen BioChem Plus, but this name was a bit misleading, so we decided to change the name in Sulfate BioChem, focusing on the fact that we are stimulating sulfate-reducing bacteria. It's a blend of different kind of sulfate, long-term and short-term dissolution capabilities for anaerobic oxidation. We have oxygen scavenger to ensure sulfate-reducing condition, and as a very low cost when you compare with the traditional XPER or oxygen treatment. Advantages, mainly that sulfate exists naturally in most groundwater, so what you are adding to the aquifer something which is also naturally present. There is a very high solubility in comparison to other electron acceptor as oxygen release powders or gels. This means that when you add oxygen, you can have maximum milligram per liter of oxygen in your groundwater. When you use a sulfate biochem, you can go at least 3 orders of magnitude, so you can have several grams per liter of oxygen. This means that oxygen doesn't become limited. We have an optimal redox condition and pH provided by buffer and additive. The cost is lower and the results are surprisingly rapid, and this is because you have a huge amount of oxygen made available for bacteria, and you don't have any infrastructure except injection wells. It is safe, it is not an oxidizer, is easy to handle, is a powder that can be diluted in water in a very easy, simple way. This is a table that summarizes some common misconceptions. The first one, of course, says that biodegradation of hydrocarbons requires aerobic condition, and as shown before, this is not true, and there are data that show that also sulfur-reducing condition can work. This is not sulfate oxidation, of course. This is not, sorry, in situ oxidation. This is biology, and the sulfate ion doesn't work like persulfate radical. This is just stimulation of natural occurring biological products. Anaerobic bed degradation is too slow. Of course, if you consider only theoretical and thermodynamic data, the aerobic biodegradation is low, but the availability of high concentration of oxygen as a sulfate makes the overall results very interesting and very fast. Hydrogen sulfide can be generated, but at the natural pH of aquifers is sequestered by metals present, so you have also an effect of precipitation of metals, which is beneficial to the environment. And hydrogen sulfide is very rare also because it reacts very quickly with natural occurring matter in the soil, reacts with the constituent of soil, so it's very unusual to detect hydrogen sulfide. Of course, the volume of sulfate which is injected is minimal in comparison to the volume of aquifer, so it's and it is quickly used, so there are no issues of presence of sulfate. Just a simple case studies. We are working on some other case studies, but this is one of the traditional that we present. This is a BDX contamination with some free phase in 3 wells and with concentration sometimes above 10,000 ppb, so 10 milligram per liter. From February to March 2004, 2006, contaminants were periodically removed by vacuuming. And in January 2007, a dual phase extraction system was installed. After dual phase, still some free phase were present. This is a symbol of the layout of the site. After injection, by June 2012, no free phase was observed in the monitoring well, and sulfate concentration were less than 25 milligrams per liter, showing that bacteria have been able to reduce both free phase presence and consuming sulfate. And at the end, BTX values were lower than 500 ppb. The last one is an example of one of the wells, probably one of the best, from 14,000 ppb to non-detectable, and still decreasing because of presence of sulfate. After talking about SBC, I would like to talk about Oxidation BioChem, and I will spend a few words about chemical oxidation. OBC, Oxidation BioChem, is an in situ chemical oxidation reagent, and mainly it is activated persulfate. Remember, what is a chemical oxidation is a technology that requires a contact between oxidizing agent and the contaminant, and the major points to be touched are to choose the right reagent, to choose the delivery mechanism, to understand the site-specific demand to create contact. Contact is the key point, because with this chemistry you have in the same time, in the same place, the oxidant and the contaminant. These are the contaminants, the oxidant that we usually use. It's permanganate, which is our traditional remoxescent, which works for mainly chlorinated solvents. We have modified phenol, which is oxygel, which has a very wide range of contaminants that can be treated. And then we have OBC, which is the activated persulfate, which mainly it is targeted to TPH treatment, but works really well also on chlorinated solvents and chloromethanes. Activation. So we always talk about activated persulfate. So why we talk about activation for persulfate? Because the persulfate ion by itself has a redox potential of 2.01 volt, and this is the direct oxidation reaction. It's similar to the reaction that happens with permanganate, with a different redox potential. We see in the previous slide that the redox potential of permanganate in the first line is 1.7, while the persulfate ion, so the direct one, is only 2 or 2.1. It has been shown that in certain conditions, so when the persulfate radicals are produced, the redox potential raises up to 2.6 volts. So this means that you can oxidize also chemicals that has a higher potential of oxidation. And in addition, the radicals are much faster than the ion reaction, and this results in faster consumption. This results in less presence of byproduct, and in general to a very more efficient treatment. So, and these radicals, so these activators, are produced in presence of an activated agent, which is typical, can be temperature, can be pH, can be presence of chelated metals like iron, or can be produced by the presence of hydrogen peroxide. In OBC, you will see that is a product that works on pH activation and H2O2 activation. A few words about competing reaction. This is a slide for permanganate, but it works also for persulfate. This is the target compound mineralization. So this is just the stoichiometry. So what we would like to generate, direct and complete oxidation of the product. There are some competing reactions. Sorry, I missed it. Okay, there are also some competing reactions, which are mainly reaction with the inorganic and with organic demand. So we call these scavengers reaction natural oxidant demand, and they are quite important because they are quite faster with respect of target compound mineralization. In addition, we have to consider the oxidant decomposition, which is negligible for permanganate, but is quite important for persulfate, in particular for activated persulfate. So you have to consider that activated persulfate can stay active in the subsoil for a maximum of a couple of months. So how much to inject? The dose evaluation runs through two steps. Mainly is to evaluate the soil oxidant demand. Evaluate soil oxidant demand, and we usually recommend to consider, if you don't have any site-specific data, 1 kilogram of OBC per ton of soil. You have to consider the stoichiometry of the contaminants you have to treat. Typically for petroleum hydrocarbon, we consider an average of 6 parts of OBC per each part of hydrocarbon, so 6 kilograms of OBC per kilogram of TPH. You should consider the composition, which is something which is difficult or almost impossible to evaluate with a number. So this means that maybe you have to use a confidence factor that helps you to overcome the composition and to overcome the fact that the site knowledge cannot be as detailed as we would like to have. So finally, what is OBC? Oxygen biochem is a patented combination of sodium persulfate and food-grade calcium peroxide in one product. So you don't need to wait nothing in the field. It is just one product that you dissolve in water and you inject. The slow-release oxygen generating formula of the calcium peroxide help to have 1 to 2 months of chemical oxidation and then a long-term anaerobic oxidation via sulfate reduction. So the fast part is the persulfate radical and the slower part is the chemistry, is the biology, sorry. And this can be injected, blended, or added prior to backfill when you have tanks pull up. The action scheme, just to summarize, is activation of persulfate by calcium peroxide giving H2O2 and driving the pH up to 12 to 14. So we have a double activation by hydrogen peroxide and pH. And when OBC is depleted, you have a biological action which can be both by presence of oxygen by calcium peroxide still releasing, but mainly comes from the presence of SO4, which can be used by bacteria in the same way as SBC works. So we can say that this mechanism is the typical mechanism of chemical oxidation by the activated persulfate, and this way is the same biological action as the SBC. This is a summary of the calculation I told you before. So effective SOD 1 kilogram per metric ton, stoichiometry 1 to 6. And this is poll number 2.
Great, thanks Lorenzo. So we're going to go ahead and launch our second poll question. How did you hear about our webinar? Great, it looks like most everybody is hearing from our email blast. So if there is anybody who isn't receiving those and would like to, let us know and we'll get you added.
Okay. Let's resume and now with an OBC case study. This is a case study coming from United Kingdom. It's a renewable energy plant in Port Clarence. It's an old industrial area in Port Clarence in UK. There is a long historical land use which includes oil refineries, salt works, railways. So it's a very, very impacted site. It's very close to iron steel works, a gas works, tire distillery, very close to a river. Mainly geology is made ground with tidal deposit and bedrock after 20 meters below ground level. As you see, geology is quite complex. We have the primary source of contamination on the top, and then you see that this impact generated some NAPL and then an impact on groundwater. And the target was free phase removal and general betterment of groundwater concentration. The strategy carried out by Geostream UK, which is one of our partners in UK, is to start with the physical treatment and to finish with chemical and biological treatment. So in this case, in this remediation area, they started with a 10-week intensive program of physical treatment and free-phase removal. This was mainly due to the fact that free-phase present requires more chemicals, and so it was evaluated that a vacuum extraction system would have been more interesting from an economical point of view and cheaper. And after 10 weeks of removal, so very rough removal, they started with a couple of injection rounds of OBC. As you will see, the total project cost is extremely low, and these are the results. So in general, you can see that from the baseline, which is the first value to the post-treatment, results are extremely interesting. I would drive your attention to well RW15 because it suggests you also an alternative way to use OBC. In this case, you see that after a pump and treat, you had a decrease of concentration are in milligram per liter, but after the first injection, and you had a peak of contamination. This is mainly because OBC, when underdosed, has the characteristic of working on the organic matter and breaking the hydrocarbon molecules and to move pH to 14 to 12. The results of this is that you enhance the mobilization of adsorbed hydrocarbons, and in general, you can also enhance the mobilization of free phase. So after the first injection, you can see, and you've seen at least a couple of sites, an increase of concentration, but after second injection, and mainly after post-treatment, concentration reduces. So we will say that in this way, you have the effect of chemical oxidation, and then this is the results of the following action of biological treatment. This approach of using OBC for mobilization of free product and adsorbed product has been used sometimes. We have some clients that use some partial and modest injection of OBC in wells just to mobilize contaminants and to recover them by vacuum track or by pump and treat or by multi-phase extraction. This is something which is a very low cost and has a very good results in terms of mass of contaminants physically removed after the first chemical injection. This is another case study, a case study which comes from the United States. You will see that in the piloting phase, we had very good results in terms of destruction of benzene, MTBE, and toluene. And you see also after the full-scale treatment, you can see that results are extremely good. You start for 2,000 to 220, or in general, you can have a strong reduction on your site. So, as a summary, OBC Oxygen BioChem is a good example of a combined chemical and biological treatment train. So, a couple of months of chemistry and then biological working, and it's a very well accepted treatment because the presence of biology helps approval by control bodies and stakeholders. Doesn't require activation or pH control. OBC is self-activating. You don't need to check pH. You don't need to first inject metals or activator. It's just it's a two component in one drum. So you need just to dissolve the OBC in water and then to inject. No explosion, no gas production, no exothermic reaction because it's activated persulfate is not a phantom reaction. So that's all from my side.
Great, thanks, Lorenzo. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions that you're thinking of right now, go ahead and type those into the questions section. We're going to get to question and answer here in just a second. If you would like a copy of the PDF, let me know. I can get you a copy of the presentation. And here's a look at our contact information. So we have Lorenzo with our European sales, his information here. Our US sales, we have Troy Lizer and Tim Colgan. And then we have Louis Hernandez, who is responsible for Canada, Mexico, and South America sales. We also have listed here our certifications, and then just a small, at the bottom here, the OBC and SBC products are Redox Tech products. And it looks like there's a couple questions coming in. One of them, Lorenzo, was about if you needed activation for OBC. So you just touched on that at the end there, that there is no activation required with OBC. It's just the one product that you're going to inject. A few more questions. A few more questions. So what would you consider the most common contaminants that are being treated with the OBC or the SBC?
Oh, mainly they're used for petroleum hydrocarbons. That's the main treatment, yes.
Okay. And then where would these products ship from?
Say again, sorry?
Where would these products ship from? So are they just manufactured
in the
United States?
product is shipped mainly from the US, is a shipper from US. I don't know exactly where. I think that Liz knows more than me. From Europe, Middle East, and Africa, we ship from Tarragona, which is in the south of Spain. Or sometimes we ship from Antwerp in Belgium.
Right. So in the US, they're manufactured by Redox Tech, and then we are coordinating that shipment to the end users. And then, as Lorenzo said, we have facilities throughout Europe that we use for manufacturing for Europe sites.
Yeah, mainly in Europe, we have a lead time of about 2 to 5 weeks, depending on the quantities.
Perfect. Good point, Lorenzo. Another question, what is the optimal target concentration of sulfate in situ following injection of SBC?
We target 1 to 2 grams per liter, depending on the concentration of contaminants. But the initial target is to stay around the 2 grams per liter of sulfates.
Okay. In the OBC case study, post-injection increase attributed to removal of TOC, was there potential for displacement as a mechanism of that increase?
It's a good point. And I think this is something that you have to consider during the design. So if you are designing just a mobilization action, so if your target is to mobilize contaminants, because then you have to recover by vacuum track or by pump and treat or by multi-phase, this depends on the geometry, on the layout of your system. If you are considering an injection to remediate the site, and so you have to avoid offsite migration, what we recommend it is to start injection on the outer area of treatment, and then from the outer area go to the center, so that if you have any displacement, the product should be displaced to the outer area where some reagent is present. So that should minimize displacement.
Okay. Is there a maximum level of sulfate that should be avoided during initial or successive applications of OBC?
I'm not aware of this. Usually we recommend to stay on the order of some grams per liter, and which are sometimes natural condition, but I don't have experience of excessive presence of SO4.
And this next question kind of leads off of that. So how long does the sulfate in the SBC remain in the groundwater? So I guess it would kind of play into the previous question of if you're going to do subsequent injections, how long can you expect to see that SBC or the sulfate from the SBC?
This depends, of course, on the activity of bacteria, but we see that when you have a very strong dosage of OBC, so you have a very high concentration of sulfate, if bacteria are present and if they have food to work on, usually in less than 1 year you go to background condition or to reasonably low condition, let's say in the order of a few 10, 20, 50 ppb. Consider that sulfate reducing bacteria doesn't work very well below 20 ppm, 20 milligram per liter of sulfates. So probably the reaction will stop around that level, 50 to 60 to 20.
Okay. What DO or ORP levels can the oxygen scavengers in SBC deal with?
Oh, good point. Residual, minimal. This is just a precaution, just to avoid some local condition, but I don't recommend to inject SBC if you have dissolved oxygen or if you have a strongly positive condition. So if you have your redox condition at plus 100 and if you have 5 milligram per liter of dissolved oxygen, I would have some concerns using SBC. This doesn't, because in that case probably your bacteria are in the aerobic area and works well there and they don't consume contaminants. So probably there is something requiring a better delineation or a better understanding of the site of why you have oxidative condition, but still you have contamination.
Okay. And it looks like one more. Are these products easily approved by state regulatory bodies in the U.S.? So I can take that one, Lorenzo. Yes, these products have been used quite frequently in many of the states throughout the United States, either as standalone amendments or treatment train type approaches. So many states are familiar with these products and there's been no issues. All right, it looks like that's all the questions for now. Again, we thank Lorenzo for giving this great presentation. Thank you to everyone for attending. If you think of any questions afterwards, either get in touch with me and we can get those answers, or directly reach out to Lorenzo or one of the members of our team. We'd be happy to assist. And we look forward to seeing all of you at any future webinars we have. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good evening.